Hey everybody, this is Mike over at Wilwood Disc Brakes. You might wonder what we're doing today. We're bringing in our friend Greg's 67 Mustang. You can see it's a pretty OG car. He's owned it for quite a long time. And about 6 years ago, we installed what's called our Classic Series brake kit on it. But since then, Greg is going to start making this car go a lot faster and put a lot more horsepower to it. So what we've been talking about is ditching the heavier Wilwood disc brake kit that's on it and going with our lighter Pro Series brake kit with still a 4-piston aluminum caliper, but we're going to shed a bunch of weight out of it, and we're going to go through it and show it to you. Wow. So you can already see that there's a bunch of weight that's shed off this car. Now looking at this brake kit, you can say, okay, well that's a decent 4-piston Wilwood brake kit. This is a brake kit we came out with about 6 years ago, and it's called our Classic Series. And the good thing about the Classic Series is, honestly, we shed a bunch of price off of the kit by going to a one-piece hub rotor. So you can see that it's like a traditional brake. It's got a rotor that's attached to the hub, and inside the hub are the bearings and races. But this weighs a lot. So what we're going to be doing is shedding a bunch of weight, and where it's going to come out of is the rotor and the hub assembly. Being cast iron in one piece, this is great for like a daily driver with 15-inch wheels, something you cruise on the weekends with your family in it. And that's kind of what Greg was doing with the car at first, but now that he's putting more horsepower in the car, and he's trying to shed weight wherever he can, especially with those lightweight wheels, by going to our Pro Series, which is going to be a little bit different, but it's still going to utilize a 4-piston caliper, our Dynalite. We're going to go from 11.3 diameter to 11-inch. And then instead of this 1-inch, just under 1-inch rotor, we're going to an 810 rotor. So once we get the parts out of the box, you're going to see a big difference, and honestly, it's a really nice brake kit that costs more money. But those are questions that we'll typically ask you is, what are you doing with the vehicle? If you say you want to go fast, we're going to get you into the lighter brake kit, because then we've got less rotational and unsprung weight that we can put on the brake kit. So let's go over some of the components that we just took off versus the parts that we're going to put on. Before we go too far into this, what I'm going to let you know is when you buy the brake kit that we're taking off of this car, it shows up to your doorstep and it weighs 66 pounds in the box. The brake kit that we're going to be installing today only weighs 41 pounds in the box when it shows up. And let's start off with the calipers. So these are both 4-piston Dynalites from the same family. This caliper, as you can see, it's got these steps on it. And the reason for that is the kit that we're taking off, the Classic Series, we had done a lot of investigating to make sure that we could fit a lot of steel wheels, which would still fit this 11.3 diameter brake kit inside of a stock wheel. And that even included some 14-inch wheels. But because now we're going with a little bit smaller kit, and we know we don't have constraints, we're going to the new Forged internal crossover kit. This internal crossover caliper is the newest version of our Dynalite, and the big difference is going to be the bolt size. So we're going from 5/16 bolts to 3/8 bolts. And what that does is it adds a lot of integrity to keep the caliper more rigid or stiff under hard braking. So with this application, this is just about a wash. These are going to weigh about the same. But this caliper is going to be much stiffer than this caliper, and you can see why, including those big 3/8 bolts. So the next thing that we took off the car, that's going to make a big difference in weight. Wow, it is actually. Is we're going from the cast steel bracket for a disc or drum that comes on the Classic Series, and we're going to the Pro Series for an 11-inch rotor, which is a 2-piece, you can see it's bolted together, billet aluminum bracket. And so those people out there asking exactly what the coating is, on both of these brackets, we finish them both in E-coat, and you can look that up and see exactly what E-coat is. But it's a good it's just a good sealant on any type of materials, especially in the automotive industry. So right now I can tell you there's a huge savings in weight. Probably, gosh, I would say at least a pound, if not more, in these two brackets. The next thing that is going to be a huge savings, and where we're really getting down to saving that 15 pounds, is going from this one piece hub rotor assembly, 1 inch thick, 11 3/4 inch diameter. So it is a larger quote unquote rotor, but where all of the weight is added is because it's one piece. And for a typical street car, that's great. It's a great place for us to dissipate heat. But now we're going to this forged aluminum hub. And you can see that this hub is machined down quite a bit. It has a screw-on billet cap. Let me see if I can get this off so I can show you. There's a huge weight savings. I mean, these two alone, I would say this is maybe a pound or two, and this is substantial. But then let's start adding up. This rotor adapter is going to be bolted to the backside of the hub assembly. Still pretty light. And then we're going to be mounting this rotor. And you can see this rotor is very lightweight, but it's still cast iron, 810, 11 inch diameter. Now 810 is the standard in brake aftermarket, where it's 0.810 thickness. And this is called a straight vane. The vanes are straight like this. So for a street car or for this application, it's more than enough mass for what we're going to be doing. But you can see this rotor is substantially lighter than this one. So this all together, and once we, whoa, you see how much lighter that is? Holy cow. Let's even add 5 studs to it. And what's crazy is I think that the 5 studs weigh about as much as the hub. So let's just add that all together. It's still way lighter than this rotor assembly. So what I'd like to do is get started on bolting this side of the car together, and you guys can follow along. Okay, so from the looks of it, it looks pretty damn centered from this side to this side, based off the center of the caliper to the center of the rotor. A couple things you can do here. What I like to do is pull the brake pads out, make sure that it's friction side towards the rotor, and it really narrows up how much more we might need to center it. So you can see that this pad's kind of tight and this one's loose. But because we shifted the caliper this way, maybe we can come back 1 shim this way and it'll take up the difference. So a way to do that is take 2 of the shims. See how 2 shims are fitting here? 2 shims are not fitting there. In fact, it's hard to even fit 1 shim in there. So we know that we need, or should, come back 1 shim this way. That'll really get us centered without even measuring it with a set of mics. Okay, so we removed 1 of the shims. So there's only 1 shim between the caliper and the bracket. So now, and again, by eye, it looked like it was centered. But let's reinstall our brake pads. Then take 1 of the shims, and you can see that I can fit a shim right there and I can fit a shim right there. So now we've ensured that we're centered. All right, guys, we've got the passenger side installed. We're happy with everything. Another thing I didn't bring up is in between each of my installations of the caliper and the brake pads, I always like to make sure that the hub and rotor assembly is still free floating. You see, we have no drag. That means that our caliper and brake pads are centered over the rotor. I'm gonna go ahead and install the driver's side brakes right now. Then after we do that, we'll go ahead and bleed the system. We'll get Greg and we'll go for a ride. We're bleeding the two front brakes. We put some fresh fluid in it. And what we do when we bleed the brakes, we do the outboard first, then we do the inside, then we do the outside one more time, and then I always kiss the inboard one more time too, just because I like to. We're doing the two-person bleed, and we have someone in the driver's seat that's pumping the pedal 3 times slow and methodically. And on that third pump, he's holding and I'm cracking the bleeder. Go ahead and pump.
Holding.
Wow, you can see all that air that still came out even after we purged it. Okay, closed. Go ahead and pump.
Holding.
Okay, pump. And then I'm going to move to the inboard. We've got the brakes on Greg's car. Everything's bled out. Everything came out perfect. The car is such a clean car that it's so nice to work on, which sometimes you're not going to find that. What we learned with this is exactly what is going to take place is exactly what he wants to happen, which is scrum a bunch of weight off the car. I'm going to be really anticipating his thoughts about when he drives it home today and gets back to us and says, hey, you know what? It probably stops the same. It's not going to be any different because it's the same size caliper. But I think that he's going to notice it in the steering, and he's going to also notice it in just how the car drives down the road because it's so much lighter. So we're going to get this thing buttoned up. I hope we got some knowledge to you guys that made some sense. Thanks so much for hanging out.